If you have already watched this introductory information, you can skip ahead no more than 9 minutes. Hello, welcome. I am predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will die on August 12th, 2025. This time-stamped email proves that this prediction that Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025 has been known since November 9th. We can see here the timestamp November 9th, 2024. On November 8th, 2024, we received the relevant prophetic signs related to Paul Simon. And as I wrote right here, God was pointing to November 8th ahead of time because Simon's death will point to Revelation chapter 8, verse 1. And this is the reason why Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025. In short, the date 8:1 and 11:8 hint at Revelation 8:1 in the Bible, which describes a period of silence that was observed in heaven. Paul Simon's first hit was Sound of Silence. As I wrote right here, it is exactly 38 weeks between November 8th and August 1st, 2025, and Paul Simon is predicted to die at the age of 83, for which 38 weeks hints at. All right, the analysis that God was pointing to August 1st was 100% correct. However, Paul Simon did not die on August 1st. Instead, God provided clear and relevant signs related to Paul Simon, which revealed adding 11 more days, including the sale of the storied mansion in Los Angeles for $110 million. 110 hints at the number 11, and Paul Simon is associated with mansion symbolism in God's signs, primarily because, for example, his biggest solo album is Graceland, and the song Graceland is about him traveling to Elvis Presley's mansion. 11 days after August 1st, which was again known since November of 2024, will be August 12th, the date it is predicted now that Paul Simon will die. And so, in other words, if you are reasonable, it is clear that essentially I predicted Paul Simon's death back on November 9th, 2024. Yes, it wasn't August 1st, but like I just said or explained, and it'll be explained much more in detail in other videos, 11 days was revealed through the prophetic signs on August 1st, which gets us to August 12th. And so in other words, again, back in November 9th, 2024, I predicted that Paul Simon would die on August 12th. If you have the eyes to see that. It's really quite simple and clear. I predicted August 1st, but again, it revealed 11 days to August 12th. And so essentially, back on November 9th, I predicted that Paul Simon would die on August 12th. A dirty bomb is a conventional explosive that uses radioactive material. I am predicting that 3 dirty bombs will explode in New York City, in Times Square, Penn Station, and Grand Central Station. There will then be a massive evacuation from Manhattan Island. I am predicting that these 3 dirty bombs will explode on either August 30th or September 4th. I am also predicting that a dirty bomb will explode in the port of Los Angeles on September 4th. I am predicting that Tehran, Iran, will be nuked by the US or possibly Israel on September 7th, 2025. This will obviously be in response to the dirty bombs that are predicted to explode in New York City. I am predicting that Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom will die in a plane crash in St. Louis as they are traveling from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles in Busch Stadium in St. Louis on August 2nd, 2028. This will be during the predicted presidential campaign of Gavin Newsom. As a result of Gavin Newsom's death, Michelle Obama will become the Democrat Party's presidential nomination. Michelle Obama will, quote unquote, win the election over J.D. Vance, on November 7th, 2028, and will become the president on January 20th, 2029. Donald Trump is predicted to run as J.D. Vance's vice president. This scheme to overcome the 22nd Amendment will backfire and inspire Michelle Obama and Barack Obama to run on the ticket with Barack Obama as Michelle Obama's vice president. She will then step down and Barack Obama will become the president again. It is predicted that there will be a massive Mary apparition on the beach in Rio, Brazil on April 24th, 2029. It is now recognized that there will be 2 massive Mary apparitions on the beach in Rio. The first of the 2 is predicted to be on March 22nd, 2029. These predicted Mary apparitions will not be secretive. They will be mainstream, worldwide news. Like all Mary apparitions in history, including at Lourdes, Guadalupe, and Fatima, this Mary apparition will be a demon pretending to be Mary. It is predicted that on April 26th, 2029, the key will open the bottomless pit and fallen angels will cross over into the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the 5th trumpet judgment that is described in Revelation chapter 9, when the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to demons pretending to be aliens. The demons pretending to be aliens will claim to be here to help us with our nuclear weapons. It is predicted that Pope Francis will be resurrected from the grave on April 26th, 2029, and it is possible that on this day, Pope Francis will announce that aliens have arrived and have made him the ambassador for the world. This will immediately give Pope Francis, the Antichrist, supreme power over governments of the world. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to a zombie pandemic and the masses becoming demonically possessed that will be facilitated through the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist and 5G frequencies. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the coming genocide politicide in America. The resurrection rapture event will occur on Pentecost on May 27th, 2029. On September 11th, 2029, there will be a catastrophic asteroid hit of Earth in the Indian Ocean. The greatest seismic effect of this will be felt on the other side of the globe, which is North America, and this will trigger an eruption of Yellowstone volcano and will cause the volcano in the Canary Islands to collapse into the Atlantic Ocean and send a mega tsunami towards the East Coast. It will also trigger the collapse of the Hoover Dam, which will cause a water panic in California, and many other devastating earthquakes. The day of the Lord, the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, Judgment Day, will be at the end of 2031. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, welcome. This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will die on August 12th, 2025. Okay, as we can see here, this prediction is being made on August, that's the subject. Yes, the date, as you can see in this time-stamped email, is August 2nd, 2025. In other words, this prediction is proven to be having been made prior to August 12th through this time-stamped email. I'll just go down here as well. I forwarded it. All right, and you can see here the timestamp, August 2nd. All right. So that said, it has been known for years that the death of Paul Simon will be a massive prophetic sign. And it was known since November 9th, 2024, that God was pointing to August 1st, 2025, regarding the death of Paul Simon. And that's because August 1st, the date 8:1, hinted at Revelation 8:1, which describes in the Bible a period of silence in heaven, and Paul Simon's first big hit that launched his career was Sound of Silence. Now, August 1st was not the date that Paul Simon died, it was a step in the trail of signs. And God has been using, in among many things in these trails of signs regarding Paul Simon, mansion symbolism. There's all kinds of reasons for the symbolism of mansion, including the Antichrist residing in the White House mansion. But Paul Simon's Graceland album, his biggest solo album, and the title of the album is Graceland, but the song also, Graceland, is about the Elvis Presley mansion, the Graceland mansion. And so one of the signs on August 1st that was amazing, that confirmed all of the analysis that God was in fact pointing to August 1st, was the sale, it was a national news story, the sale of the storied mansion in Los Angeles that was built for the most prolific TV producer in history, Aaron Spelling. The name of the mansion goes by the Manor or Candyland after his wife Candy. And that sale of the mansion was for $110 million. The number 110 is extremely prophetic in God's signs in general. For example, Joshua led the Israelites into the promised land, and they then enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7. In other words, it was a 7. And the Graceland album is the 7th album of Paul Simon's. And Joshua, who led the Israelites, died at the age of 110. They entered into the promised land on the date 110 in the Hebrew calendar. Jesus officially arrived into Jerusalem on the date 110, this Nisan 10 date. That's the name of the month in the Hebrew calendar. And the second coming would be symbolized by 2 times the date 110, or in other words, 110, which is why it was 2 times 110 stories that collapsed on 9/11. It was a massive sign that was communicating the second coming of Christ, in other words. And so this number 110 is in general very, very prophetic, but especially here too because of, again, the number 7. And Simon is now on tour, for example, promoting his most recent album, 7 Psalms, which he claims to have been directed to make in a prophetic dream through a voice. And anyway, that's all explained in other videos. But 7 Psalms is interesting too because following the period of silence in heaven in Revelation 8:1 is the 7 trumpets of God's judgment and destruction. So in other words, the period of silence is the warning before the judgment and destruction. In other words, the death of Paul Simon will be a warning before the judgment and destruction in the 7 trumpets that are described. Paul Simon also has a big hit named Late in the Evening, which is in itself the name symbolic of coming judgment and time is running out. But also that song is known for its heavy use of trumpets. Okay, and so what I'm saying is that the $110 million mansion sign, in short, on August 1st, confirmed all of the analysis because it was a mansion sign. And also there are connections between Aaron Spelling and Paul Simon. For example, the 3rd song released from the 7th album, as in 3 sets of 7, as I just mentioned, was The Boy in the Bubble of Paul Simon. And that was inspired by the Aaron Spelling TV movie, The Boy in the Plastic Bubble, just for example. Also, Aaron Spelling, God uses extremes and records for signs. Aaron Spelling was the producer of the longest running drama series in television history, Seventh Heaven. But anyway, the $110 million mansion indicated adding 11 days because 110 hints at 11. For example, it was Flight 11 with a crew of 11 that flew into the Twin Towers that looked like a giant 11 in New York State, the 11th state, and the towers were 110 stories. So it was all part of this 11 symbolism. Jesus coined the phrase the 11th hour, which in ancient Israel referred to the last hour of daylight before darkness, and in English is an idiom that means last chance, time is running out, as in last chance for America to repent and turn back to God after the warning on 9/11. Now, so that's why we knew, or God revealed, adding 11 days. Okay, and so again, I knew of August 1st since November 9th, 2024. And then Paul Simon didn't die on that day, but we received the relevant, clear Paul Simon signs, and that was just one of them, and I only scratched the surface of that one. But that one revealed adding 11 days. Okay? It also revealed adding 7 days from the seventh heaven to August 8th, and I expect clear and relevant signs on that date to confirm adding an additional 4 days to get to August 12th. All right? So I want to be clear here. I've known, in other words, the death of Paul Simon on August 12th, essentially, since November of 2024, right? Because I just explained it, right? If you didn't get it, you won't get it, so don't worry about it. You know, you're just going to remain a skeptic and an atheist, that's fine. But I'm pretty clear, and I think I explained it well enough. I've known August 1st since November of 2024 for Paul Simon's death, and then God revealed signs that indicated adding an additional 11 days to get August 12th. And so therefore, I basically understood or knew that Paul Simon would die on August 12th, if you will, since November of 2024. All right? And in the meantime, I haven't been making videos for every day of the year between November 2024 and August 1st. That was the next step. Like the signs on August 8th, 2024 were like the most recent step, if you will. I mean, what I'm saying is that I did not make videos with reasons for every day of the year leading up to August 1st, and likewise doing so for, leading up to August 12th. And anyone that would do that would be a crazy person, and the person that thinks that that's what's going on here is the crazy person, because that's completely irrational. Right? No one would do that, right? No one in their right mind. And if you think I sound like someone who's not in their right mind, well, go for it, right? You're just being crazy, though. You're being irrational. And the bottom line is the reason why is because you really don't want there to be a righteous God that you are accountable to for your sin, and praying to a God and things like that in the morning are not comfortable for you. You're icky. It's icky for you. You don't like that concept. You want to be independent. You don't want there to be a God. And so you follow irrational conclusions when faced with evidence for God. And this would be an extreme example, because I'm predicting that Paul Simon will die on August 12th. And the date, as I just showed you of this video, yes, the post date of this video proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time. And the date of this email, August 2nd. So it's clear. I'm predicting this ahead of time. I'm not making a video for every day of the week or every day of the year in hopes that Paul Simon will eventually die. That's ridiculous. He could live another 7 years. That's absurd. Why would anyone do such a thing? But furthermore, the reasons that I'll be explaining in this video for how August 12th is known are extremely profound and clear. And no human being could concoct these reasons in their own imagination. In other words, this is clearly from God. You'll see these explanations for how August 12th is known, again, could not be invented in a human being's imagination. All right? And they're clear and profound. So let's get into it. Let's start. This email is documenting the prediction that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on August 12, 2025. Paul Simon is predicted to die on August 12, 2025, exactly 7 times 7 times 7 weeks after Paul Simon had his prophetic dream in which a voice instructed him to produce a new album and title it 7 Psalms. The theme of this album is transitioning into the afterlife. We're predicting Paul Simon to die and transition into the afterlife on August 12th. The name of Paul Simon's most recent album is 7 Psalms. And Paul Simon's death is predicted to be exactly 7 times 7 times 7 weeks, as in 3 sets of 7, which I already explained the prophetic significance of how this is derived from the Bible, after the date, which, by the way, was January 15th, 2019, that Paul Simon had this dream. in which he claims he was instructed with a voice to make the new album and title it 7 Psalms. Okay? So that's, in other words, that can't be, that's a clear, profound, more than profound, because it's 7 Psalms, and we've got 7 times 7 times 7, and furthermore, God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, which is why it's 3 sets of 7 in the book of Joshua, like I was explaining. Okay. Also, in the 3 sets of 7 in the book of Joshua, the Israelites blew 7 trumpets, and Paul Simon's death will point to the beginning of Revelation chapter 8 with the sound of silence that was observed in heaven, and that is a warning in the Bible of the following 7 trumpets of judgment. In other words, Paul Simon's death will be a warning of the fulfillment of the 7 trumpets of God's judgment. August 12, 2025 will be 11 days after August 1st, 2025, and the sale of a storied mansion in Los Angeles for $110 million, as I was just talking about. 110 hints at 11, as I mentioned. That's why the 11 days from the sale of the $110 million storied, famous mansion. The mansion was built for Aaron Spelling, the most prolific TV producer and show producer in history. Spelling produced the TV series Seventh Heaven and a TV movie, The Boy in the Plastic Bubble. Simon's hit song, the 3rd song from the 7th album, as in 3 sets of 7, The Boy in the Bubble, okay, is on the 7th solo album, as in the 7th Heaven. Graceland. And the Graceland song is about a mansion. And we connect Paul Simon because God is using Paul Simon in association with mansion signs because of the Graceland mansion. And then we have this mansion sign that connects to Paul Simon through The Boy in the Bubble, for example. Okay, because The Boy in the Bubble is on the Graceland mansion album. And again, it's the 3rd song, so it's the 3 sets of 7. And again, Joshua died at the age of 110 after leading the Israelites in a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security collapsed on Jericho. So we've got the 3 sets of 7, The Boy in the Bubble, the 3rd song released from the 7th album, and the album is about a mansion. The title of the mansion album is Graceland, and Graceland is about a mansion. And we have this sale of this mansion by the producer of the movie The Boy in the Plastic Bubble, which inspired the song, The Boy in the Bubble, and his mansion selling for $110 million. And Joshua died at the age of 110 after he led the Israelites into 3 sets of 7. So that's profound, and no one could have made this up in their own mind, right? So now we have the 11 days from this, but also the exact 7 times 7 times 7 weeks. Now it's clear, it should be anyway, to the rational thinking person, that this is from God and I'm not making this stuff up and doing so for every day of the year or something to that effect. Okay, this prediction is being made ahead of time, and not just a few days ahead of time. It's essentially, like I explained, being made ahead of time since November of 2024. Because again, the 11 days gets us to August 1st, which I knew since 2024. The agent who first signed Simon and Garfunkel to an album was Wally Amos, the founder of Famous Amos Cookies. Simon's first hit was Sound of Silence, and his biggest album was Bridge Over Troubled Water. In God's signs, a bridge is the same symbolism as a door. In God's signs, Simon is associated with this bridge and door symbolism because of one of the trumpet judgments that follow the sound of silence in heaven that describes demons crossing the bridge into the earthly realm after the door to the bottomless pit is opened. Okay, so and again, the symbolism of a door is the same as a bridge in the signs. Simon's biggest album was Bridge Over Troubled Water. And so the word door, and that's because of one of the trumpet judgments that follow the sound of silence. Simon's first hit, Sound of Silence, in the book of Revelation. It follows that with these 7 trumpet judgments. And one of them describes the demons crossing over the bridge into the earthly realm after the door is opened to the bottomless pit. Now, the word door is equal to 52 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. And the word bridge is equal to 45 in simple English gematria. Simon is predicted to die exactly 52 weeks after Wally Amos died, the agent that first signed Simon and Garfunkel. Amos died on the prophetic 9th of Av date in the Hebrew calendar, and on this day, 9 Jews were arrested for shutting down traffic on the I-405, Interstate 405, in California, in protest of the Israeli war in Gaza, and 405 hints at 45. And 45 is the 9th triangular number. But again, so we have the 45 number connected to with 52 weeks, and 52 and 45 symbolize the bridge and the door. Now, also, the protest began at 9 a.m., and it was 40 to 50 people involved, which also hints at 45. And again, 45 is the 9th triangular number, and 9 Jews were ultimately arrested. And it was Jews because it was the 9th of Av in the Hebrew calendar. And anyway, it's Wally Amos who signed Simon and Garfunkel, who also died on this day at the age of 88. And that's because of the 8th and 9th chapters, the last 2 chapters of the book of Amos. So he died at the age of 88 on the 9th of Av because of that, which speaks of these chapters, speak of the destruction and warning of judgment for Israel, and then ultimately in the end its restoration, which is what the 9th of Av date is all about. And so anyway, you get the idea. And if you will, when the protesters shut down the freeway, they made a line of human bodies across the freeway that stopped up the traffic. And that's symbolic, if you will, of a bridge. But also, it's also symbolic of the stopping up of the Jordan River when they crossed over, and also the Red Sea, when they crossed the Red Sea over the land bridge between the 2 sides of the Gulf of Aqaba. Okay, so anyway, that's enough here. I think you get the idea. These are very important concepts, the bridge and door symbolism, and then we have this to the death of Simon and Garfunkel's agent that first signed them, famous Amos, as in Book of Amos in the Bible, the prophet. Genesis 7:11 describes the beginning of the flood judgment. Simon is associated with the number 4 through door symbolism. August 12, 2025 will be 7 months and 11 days after rainstorms, which is flood symbolism, in the first hours of 2025, on January 1st, 2025, New Year's Day, in which 4 of the nation's iconic locations were struck by lightning. Okay, the Washington Monument, the Capitol Building, the Empire State Building, and the One World Tower. There were also 2 locations in New York City and 2 locations in Washington, D.C. that were targeted by terrorists on 9/11 for a total of 4 locations, 4 iconic locations, just like the lightning on this New Year's Day 2025. Now, if I haven't explained yet in this video, the reason why Simon is associated with the number 4 is through door symbolism, and that's because the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and Simon is Jewish, is the symbol for a door. The word for that letter is dalat, and the 4th letter in the Greek alphabet is derived from that. That word is delta, and the word door is derived from the word delta. Okay, and so it all goes back to the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the word door. And so that's why God is using this number 4 in association with door, which is associated with Simon, because of one of the trumpet judgments after the sound of silence in heaven, involving the door that is opened with a key to the bottomless pit, from which demons will emerge and cross the bridge over into the earthly realm. Bridge over troubled water, Simon's song. Also, the word key is equal to 41 in English, simple English gematria, And Simon was born in 1941. He was born on the 13th day of the month in 41, and 41 is the 13th prime number. And that's just one reason for why the number 13 is also but that's another story. We just want to establish the number 4 here. Okay, so that's one way in which, or why, the number 4 is associated with Paul Simon. Again, Paul Simon's death will hint at the sound of silence that occurred in heaven that is then followed by the trumpet judgments. And one of the trumpet judgments includes the opening of the door with a key to the bottomless pit. And then the demons crossing the bridge over in between the demonic realm and earthly realms. So, but also, a very big important reason why God is associated in his signs, Paul Simon, with the number 4 is Revelation 8, not only Revelation 8:1, and therefore the trumpet judgment with the opening of the door, but also Amos 8:1, which is why famous Amos, the founder of famous Amos cookies, Wally Amos, died at the age of 88 on the 9th of Av, and making it prophetic. Wally Amos was the agent that first signed Simon and Garfunkel, and he lured them into his office with cookies, and then he went on to found famous Amos cookies. So it's not a coincidence. I mean, God made this man create or found famous Amos cookies after he signed Simon and Garfunkel through cookies in order to point to the prophetic significance of Wally Amos, in order to point to the book of Amos. And specifically the 8th chapter here, which is why he died at the age of 88. And again, Paul Simon's death is pointing to, or will point to, Revelation 8:1 and the period of sound of silence in heaven. And Amos 8:1 describes a basket of summer fruit. Now, the prophetic signs we received on August 1st were in line with the season of a basket of summer fruit. Likewise, Paul Simon's predicted death on August 12th is during the time of year when there are baskets of summer fruit. And in other words, God used the death of Wally Amos at the age of 88 to confirm that Paul Simon would die during the 8th month of the year of August, in which there are baskets of summer fruit. But also, God used all of this to point to the first chapter of the book of Amos. The first chapter of the book of Amos has 15 verses. And that's why Paul Simon's prophetic dream occurred on the 15th day of the first month, 1/15. January 15th, 2019 was the day that Paul Simon had his prophetic dream, in which he was instructed to make the album 7 Psalms and to name it 7 Psalms. And we know this because when journalists visit him and interview him at his studio, he shows them the framed piece of paper on the wall that he wrote on after having the dream. And it has a date. So it's well known that his dream occurred on this specific date. But the reason why is because God is pointing through this date, 1/15, to the first chapter of Amos, which has 15 verses. Now, proof of this is the fact that the album 7 Psalms was released exactly 115 weeks before the prophetic signs on August 1st, which, as I have explained, revealed adding 11 days to reach the predicted death of Paul Simon. So that 115 weeks was astounding, which was one reason why I was basically 100% sure that Paul Simon would die on August 1st. But then again, I shouldn't have been, because I know how God signs works, and he often uses steps. And it does make complete sense that he would use August 1st as a step if he didn't actually want Paul Simon to die. If he had another design for the date of Paul Simon's death, he would still use August 1st because of it pointing to Revelation 8:1 and the period of silence that was observed in heaven, the sound of silence. So anyway, that sound of silence sign date, if you will, with the prophetic signs that I've mentioned prior in this video and other videos, was exactly 115 weeks after the release of the 7 Psalms album, which was inspired in a dream on the date 1/15, Because it points to the first chapter of the book of Amos, which has 15 verses. Now, why is God doing this? Because in those 15 verses of the first chapter is repeated a Hebrew idiom, and Paul Simon is Jewish, which is for 3 transgressions and for 4. Okay, quote, for 3 transgressions and for 4, unquote, is an idiom in Hebrew that is repeated multiple times in this chapter. This idiom means the tolerable limit of transgressions has been exceeded, and now judgment is unavoidable. Paul Simon's death will point to that, because it will point to the sound of silence in heaven that's followed by the 7 trumpet judgments. Hence why the 7 Psalms album, for example, and it being inspired on the date 115, because it points to this idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4. Basically, in ancient Jewish culture, the 3 symbolized completeness, and the 4 was like an exceeding, an excessive, an amount over the limit. That's basically it. And that's why, as I explained, the idiom means the tolerable limit of transgressions has been reached, and now judgment is unavoidable. So God is using, in other words, Paul Simon and this 4 symbolism, this number 4 associated with Simon, to point to this, to point to how America has exceeded its tolerable limit of transgressions, and now judgment and destruction of the nation, America, is unavoidable. And again, Paul Simon symbolizes America. He has a very big, famous hit named America, but he is the American baby boomer singer, if you will, the folk singer that God is using through his music, etc. And so anyway, we have for 3 transgressions and for 4, which is why the number 4 is associated with Paul Simon. Okay, but it's Genesis 7:11 that describes the beginning of the flood judgment. That's why Paul Simon is predicted to die 7 months and 11 days, as in Genesis 7:11, after the rainstorms, which is flood symbolism, in the first hours, the beginning of 2025, in which the 4 iconic buildings were struck. The Washington Monument, the Capitol Building, the Empire State Building, and the One World Tower. Now, like I said, that is a parallel with 9/11. Now, 7 months and 11 days is also 223 days, and 223 is the 44 plus 4th prime number. God repeats number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, for his signs and connections. On this same night as the lightning, the first day of the year, a Muslim terrorist, and again, the lightning paralleled the terrorism on 9/11. So on this same night as the lightning that paralleled the terrorism in 9/11, a Muslim terrorist drove his Ford, as in hinting at the number 4, lightning truck. That's the name of the model of the Ford truck. It's a lightning truck. And this was the day of the 4 lightning strikes. In other words, Ford lightning, as in 4 lightning strikes. He drove his Ford lightning truck into a crowd of people in New Orleans. This was on a Wednesday morning at 3 a.m. It occurred just after 3 a.m. And Simon and Garfunkel's first album was named Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m. That's why it all relates to Paul Simon. Wednesday is the 4th day of the week. The attack killed 7 plus 7 people, and another act of terrorism at Trump Tower on the same day involved a Tesla, and Nikola Tesla was known for his lightning strikes, and electricity is symbolic of lightning. A Tesla truck that exploded at the Trump Tower and injured 7 people. That's a 3 sets of 7, because 7 plus 7 were killed in the Ford lightning truck terrorism, and in the Tesla terrorism at Trump Tower, as in trumpets that were blown in the 3 sets of 7, 7 people were injured. Like the Israelites marched around the walls of Jericho once per day for 7 days, and on the 7th day they marched around 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. So the 7 people injured at the Trump Tower. Now, exactly 7 months after the 7 plus 7 killed and the 7 injured, after this was the news of the sale of the mansion owned by the producer of the longest running TV drama series, Seventh Heaven. And the mansion sold for 110 million, as in 3 sets of 7 after Joshua led them and he died at 110. And 11 days after this is the predicted date that Paul Simon will die. That gets us a 7 and 11. Because again, it's 7 months from the 7 plus 7 deaths and 7 injured to the 110 mansion. And then it's 11 days after that to the predicted death of Paul Simon. So it's 7 months and then 11 days, broken down. But Paul Simon will die also 7 months and 11 days without a breakdown after the rainstorms, which was Genesis 7:11 symbolism that caused the lightning. Okay? New Orleans is relevant in the lyrics of the song Graceland because it can be assumed that Simon is traveling from New Orleans to the Graceland mansion in Memphis. Because that's what the song is about. It's about how he is traveling to Graceland and how he's on the highway. And we can assume that he came from the south in New Orleans because he's talking about driving through the Mississippi Delta. And that's just the logical starting point if you're on your way to Memphis and you're not flying into Memphis but driving there. And, you know, New Orleans is known for music, so Paul Simon probably had another reason for being in New Orleans as well. I mean, if you're going to be in that area of the country and you're Paul Simon, you're going to also visit New Orleans as well as Memphis. And it could very well be that Memphis was a side trip. You know, I'm just guessing. But I know that Paul Simon, in his music, appreciates the southern styles of music in the Deep South. He incorporates that into his music. At least he did in his later music, or in the 80s. And so that's, you know, another reason why it would be likely that he would have been in New Orleans. But also, more to it prophetically, New Orleans is in the state of Louisiana, which is the 6 plus 6 plus 6th state. And the number of the Antichrist in the Bible is 666. And the Graceland mansion is the king of rock and roll's mansion in Memphis. Memphis is named after Memphis, Egypt. And the mansion is symbolic of a king's palace. And in the Bible, the king of Egypt, who persecuted the Jews, is symbolic of the Antichrist, a type for the Antichrist. Genesis 7:4 is the first mention of the flood judgment when God warned Noah. August 12th, 2025 will be 7 plus 4 days after the sale of the mansion built for the producer of Seventh Heaven and a prophetic mass shooting in Montana in which there were 4 deaths. Okay? So, let me just repeat that. Genesis 7:4 is the first mention of the flood judgment when God warned Noah. Paul Simon's death will be a warning of judgment and destruction for America. The biggest, arguably, baby boomer singer, American singer, folk singer as well, okay? And all of Paul Simon's songs God has been using. So Paul Simon symbolizes America, in other words, and his death will symbolize the warning because it will point to the period of silence in heaven, which was a warning before the 7 trumpets of judgment. But anyway, Genesis 7:4 is the warning. Paul Simon's death will be a warning on August 12th, and it will be 7 plus 4 days after the sale of the mansion of the producer of Seventh Heaven, and also on that day, a mass shooting prophetic sign in Montana in which there were 4 deaths. I explained the details of this prophetic sign in another video. Now, this date that this occurred, the Seventh Heaven sign and the 4 deaths sign, which hints at Genesis 7:4, this August 1st date was in turn 7 times 4 days after the date 7:4, and the flooding in the 7 times 4th state, Texas, to join the Union. This flooding occurred near where Simon currently lives, and as explained elsewhere, the flooding pointed to Paul Simon. I explained that in the Texas flooding video. It's an amazing prophetic sign, and it, in fact, pointed to Paul Simon. I mean that literally one of the biggest reasons for this prophetic sign was to point to Paul Simon in Wimberley, Texas, which is near Kerr County, which is where the flooding occurred with Mystic Camp and everything. And as I explained in the other video, part of the connections in that story that God's telling was the prophetic flooding in Wimberley, Texas in 2015. Okay, that's another story though. But that's amazing. Did you see that? So the day Paul Simon is predicted to die will be 7 plus 4 days after August 1st and the seventh heaven and 4 death sign, which was in turn 7 times 4 days after the date 7-4 and the flooding in the 7 times 4th state. Because it all hints at Genesis 7-4 about the flood, which is why the flooding on the date 7-4 in the 7 times 4th state. But then you add 7 times 4 days and then 7 plus 4 days to get the date of the predicted death of Paul Simon. And again, the flooding in the 7 times 4th state on the date 7-4 pointed to Paul Simon. Simon is associated with the number 4 through door symbolism. Simon is known for his music compositions, and music involves music keys. An important aspect of a basketball court is its keys. August 12, 2025 will be 44 plus 4 days after June 25th, 2025, and the big news story about the 4 times 4th player selected in the NBA draft by the Portland Trail Blazers. Okay? So again, God is associating massive, big time, this number 4 with Paul Simon because of the door symbolism. And again, the door is open to the bottomless pit in one of the trumpet judgments that follow the sound of silence in heaven. And Paul Simon's first hit was Sound of Silence. And of course, the door symbolism is the same as the bridge. And his biggest album was Bridge Over Troubled Water, which would be the bridge that the demons crossed in the bottomless pit, troubled water. Okay? Now, Simon's known for his music compositions, which involve keys. And an important aspect of basketball courts is keys. And again, Simon was born in 41, and the word key is equal to 41 in simple English gematria. All right, as I explained earlier, and on and on. Now, August 12th, and here's the number 4 again. August 12th, the date Simon is predicted to die, will be 44 plus 4 days, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, after July 25th, and that was the day of the big news story within the NBA draft, which was the 4 times 4th player selected. There was 2 main stories, the first player selected and the 4 times 4th player selected. And God pairs 23 and 44 together to confirm the signs and connections. And this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which he would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 23 and 44. And I know this is the case because I've been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 7 years. Anyway, 23 and 44 because the 44th president was the basketball president who wore jersey number 23. Speaking of this basketball sign and the NBA draft and the 4 times 4th player. The other player, the first player selected, was associated with the number 23 because the big story about that guy was how he is from a small town in the 23rd state, Maine. And during the draft, because he's from such a small town that everyone knows each other, the whole town was gathered in the gymnasium and watched the whole NBA draft live on television and cheered for him, and that was the story. And it was all about the 23rd state. And and God uses the number 23 for prophetic signs. But he pairs it with 44, which is why the other story was the 4 times 4th player. And he was the guy selected by the Portland, as in portal, as in door, Trailblazers. And the story is that this guy was obscure and no one knew about him prior to his selection. And he comes from an obscure league in China. And China is the red dragon, which is symbolic of the red dragon in the Bible, which is symbolic of the Antichrist. And the Antichrist is the basketball president. And so he was selected 4 times 4th. And it was a news story because he was from, obscure league in China and all that, right? Okay. So a port, as in Portland, or a portal, is symbolic of a door, as in 4 times 4th player selected, 44 plus 4 days before Simon's predicted death. Now, June 25th was in turn 444 days after the eclipse over America on the date 4/8, which is at 48, which is 44 plus 4. And that's a typo. It was in 2024. The path of totality of the eclipse first entered the U.S. over Eagle Pass, Texas, and then passed over Wimberley, Texas, where Simon currently lives. The fourth song released from Simon's Bridge Over Troubled Water, as in Doors 4, was El Condor Pasa, which is the same meaning as Eagle Pass. And El Condor, the condor, a condor is a bird of prey just like an eagle, and it has large wingspans and all of that. Pasa means pass, as in Eagle Pass. Okay, so the eclipse, in other words, pointed to Paul Simon. It first entered the U.S. over Eagle Pass, and then shortly after passed over Wimberley, Texas, where Paul Simon lives. Okay, and the fourth song, as in fourth song, okay, was Troubled Water, was from Bridge Over Troubled Water, was El Condor Pasa. On the day of the eclipse, Nike released its first commercial for its new Wembanyama basketball shoe. So 444 days, in other words, connects the basketball draft to this basketball sign that occurred on the day of the eclipse. And Wembanyama, the name, hints at Wimberley, and Wembanyama plays for San Antonio, which is right near Wimberley. Wembanyama also hints at the 44th president, Obama, the basketball president. Now, Wembanyama's nickname is the Alien because he is 7 foot 4 inches tall. And the Nike commercial, and that's not common for a basketball player because usually when they are that tall, they're not fast and they're not good. And the Nike commercial used alien and UFO imagery because of his nickname being the Alien. The number 4 symbolizes the door that demons will enter through and then pretend to be aliens from another planet. The flooding near San Antonio and Wimberley, Texas, that occurred on the date 7/4 was 4 times 4 times 4 plus 4 days after the commercial for the Alien, who is 7 foot 4 inches. So the flooding that pointed to, Simon and Wimberley, Texas on the date 7/4 and the 7 times 4th state connected with these 4s, and 4 4s actually, to the commercial involving the Alien, who is named so because he is 7 foot 4 inches tall, which confirms all of the everything, right? The path of totality of the eclipse crossed the path of totality of the eclipse in 2017 that went over America, exactly where the 2017 eclipse peaked. The 2017 eclipse peaked, the 2017 eclipse first entered Oregon near Portland, as in Portland Trailblazers. The name Portland Trailblazers hints at a path of totality of an eclipse that is produced by the blazing sun. A trail, path of totality, blazers, basketball, orange basketballs also symbolize the sun, okay? And in their logo, they probably have a flaming basketball, which would be symbolic of the sun, as in the path of totality of the eclipse. The paths of totality of the eclipses crossed over each other over the area of the country that is nicknamed Little Egypt and Cairo, Illinois. Simon's song, Graceland, is about traveling to the king of rock and roll's mansion in Little Egypt in Memphis, Tennessee, the 4 times 4th state. And Memphis is named after Memphis, Egypt. And again, the king's palace, the rock and roll king's mansion, is symbolic of a king's palace in Egypt. And the king in Egypt is symbolic of the Antichrist. The eclipse on 4/8/2024 is 4 times 4 months and 4 days before Simon's predicted death on August 12th. And again, the eclipse crossed over the other eclipse over Little Egypt in the 4 times 4th state, pointed to the mansion nearby in Little Egypt, etc. By the way, Elvis Presley has a hit song, Little Egypt. Okay. The date, August 12th, is 12/8, outside the US, and this hints at G128 in the Greek concordance, which is the word that means the Ethiopian. In the Bible, the Ethiopian was traveling to Egypt. He was a servant of the Queen of Egypt. In God's signs, the Ethiopian, as in the Ethiopian symbolism from the Bible, in God's signs, the Ethiopian symbolism, as in G128, as in the date 12:8, which is 8:12 in the US, okay, in God's signs, the Ethiopian points to the Antichrist 44th president who was born in East Africa, near Ethiopia, and who will reside in the White House mansion. This is merely scratching the surface of the reasons for how this prediction is known in advance. For more information, please visit odyssey.com, spelled ODYSEE.com, or rumble.com video channel, Asteroid Prediction, and also read the website trumpprediction.com. The date 8/12, August 12th, the date it is predicted that Paul Simon will die, hints at Revelation 8:12, which is the fourth trumpet judgment. And as I've explained in this video already, the number 4 is extremely important regarding Paul Simon and God's signs. So that's and again, the trumpet judgments follow the period of sound of silence that's observed in heaven, and Simon's death will point to that, his first hit being sound of silence. And so of those trumpet judgments, the fourth one occurs in this Revelation 8:12 passage, which is another reason why Paul Simon is predicted to die on the date 8/12, because again of the importance of the number 4 regarding in connection with Paul Simon. In this fourth trumpet judgment, the word third, as in 3, the word third is repeated. The number 4 is associated with Simon and God's signs. One reason is the Hebrew idiom that is repeated in the first chapter of the book of Amos, for 3 transgressions and for 4, as I explained earlier. The idiom means the tolerable limit of transgressions has been exceeded and now judgment and destruction is unavoidable. And so that's another reason why this 4 is associated, the number 4 is associated with Paul Simon. So anyway, we have this idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4, and we have the fourth trumpet judgment, which has the word third repeated multiple times. Simon and Garfunkel's first album, which contains the song Sound of Silence, is Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. Wednesday is the 4th day of the week. In other words, the reason why Paul Simon's first album with Garfunkel is named Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. is because it hints at this 4 and 3, and for 3 transgressions and for 4, Hebrew idiom that God is pointing to through the death of Paul Simon, as I explained earlier. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold, Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.